All right. Okay, we're going to get started on the March meeting. And, tonight we're going to have John Hebberger do a little talk on his trip down the Grand Canyon and photographing in the Grand Canyon. But our next event next month will be a talk on infrared photography.
Oh,
So
cool.
we have one of our members, Dave Morgan, is scheduled to give that talk, and we'll do that. Um, if anybody has any questions, oh, and later, let's see, in June, we're going to do a print day. So I want everybody to get ready for that. If you want to participate, keep checking the snapshots so that we have to limit the number of people that can come. So you want to jump in on that, you get a free print and some experience and nice socializing with everyone. Um,
What date in June is that going to happen?
Oh, I knew you'd ask me that. I rushed in here. I'm a little unprepared. Let me see if I
What week? The
think it's
Saturday of week
or
2 or 3 or
hang on a second. I'll tell you.
I can probably pull it up here. Hang on.
Uh,
bum, bum.
the 20th.
You got it.
Yeah. So the 20th of June. And you'll have to submit before that, but we'll put everything in a snapshot so you can get all the details. Uh,
It's such a fun day. It's really
yeah.
great.
And if anybody else has something they want to speak about or talk about, let me know right quick before we turn it over to John.
So
I
you
think, all
want
right.
Michael to say something about the Yellowstone trip
Oh,
No, we don't have any details to share yet, but we will soon.
for
yeah,
next year?
we're
Yeah.
coming up soon. Okay. All right. Well, we'll get started. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take it away. I think you're a co-host already. So,
Yep. So if David can't do it, if you would either mute or be quiet, either one is fine with me. So let me go ahead and get this thing up here. All right, let me do that. Okay. Um, so this is going to be a tour, basically.
John, you muted yourself.
I,
well,
I
uh,
don't think I did, but anyway, I think I'm
yeah,
unmuted now.
I'm sorry. I hit mute all and it included the co-host. So, okay. Everybody
Okay.
step back. All right. You're unmuted now.
All right. So, for some of you that are on this or that may watch it later, maybe this will be, sort of a review of what you've done, or you can compare it with what you've done. But with this presentation, what I'm going to try and do is to give everybody else who hasn't been a taste of, what an outing like this can be like, and to show, give you a taste of some of the maybe more memorable things that can be seen and experienced. And then I'm going to wait till the end to do this after we've looked at the photos, and that is discuss some of the the challenges and issues that revolve around trying to do photography in a trip like this. So let's see if I can get this to advance. There we go. All right, so the trip we did the trip that was about almost 190 miles from beginning up here just south of, let me make this a pointer, laser pointer. So up here, just south of Lake Powell, the Glen Canyon Dam at Lee's Ferry, which is the typical input point for people beginning a trip through the Grand Canyon. And then we took out nearly 190 miles later down here at a place called Whitmore Wash. And this brings you through most of the canyon, obviously. There's Lake Mead over here. And it also, I think, brings you through and past and exposes you to what are probably most of the really scenic, particularly memorable sites that you can see in the canyon. So this was an 11-day rafting trip. And what a little bit of background, there are two types of major types of trips that you can do. One is a private trip. You can apply for a permit. It's a lottery system. And, if they think that you've got the right stuff and, you're lucky you get a permit, you can go and do it on your own. Most of the trips through the Grand Canyon are commercial, and there are, last I checked, there are 16 licensed outfitters that the park is licensed for trips through the Grand Canyon. There are basically three kinds, and one is, we saw one group doing this paddling rubber rafts, which actually looked like it would probably be fun for about an hour or two, and then beyond that, it probably wasn't very much fun. A good many are rowed. They're moderate sized rafts mostly. And then what we did, and you'll see a lot of pictures of them, are these large, almost 40-foot long motorized rafts. And again, our trip was 11 days, and just a quick check, the cost for a trip like that through the canyon these days in the 8 to 11 day range is roughly $4,000 to $5,000 right now. My feeling, having done it the one way, which is the motorized, is that there are a lot of benefits to doing it that way. One of the best is that it gives you more time to stop along the river and see things, off the river, to take side canyon walks. And those were some of the more memorable things that we did were some of the side canyon walks. So, it's different strokes for different folks, but that really worked really well for us, and we thought it was a great way to go. In terms of, really successful trip, our trip was in the middle of April. And probably, from a climate perspective, the best times are probably April, May, so spring, and September, October in the fall. Otherwise, the heat, as I understand it, in the canyon during the course of the summer can be brutal. And on top of that, you have the monsoon season that hits Arizona in the summertime. And if you're going to get deluges occur and pour a whole lot of dirty water into the canyon, that's more likely when it's going to occur. So, again, different types of experiences depending on what you do, but we really enjoyed the spring trip. It was very temperate, very pleasant temperatures, and there are a lot of flowers out, relatively speaking. And again, it was very comfortable, both riding through the canyon and doing walks up some of the side canyons. In terms of personal gear, I'm not going to dive into that other than towards the end about the photography. There's plenty of advice on the internet, but a lot of quick drying clothes, layers for cool and warm conditions. Obviously a wide brimmed hat, shoes that can be wet and hiked in, et cetera, et cetera. You can find, all kinds of stuff about that. So I will talk about photographic gear and challenges and whatnot, but I'm mostly going to say that to the end. So the trips begin here at Lee's Ferry, and this is river mile 0 for trips through the Grand Canyon. And, as you can see, you're not sheer walled here. This is, as the canyon, as it goes back up towards Lake Powell, the Glen Canyon Dam. But there at Lee's Ferry, it's a very wide open spot there like that. Yeah, I'm a geologist, and we had a geologist along on the trip, and I'm not going to make this a geological discussion, but you can't really, I don't think about or tour the Grand Canyon and not at least give a little bit of thought to the geology. And I'll show just one or two slides in the middle about the geology. But you start in rocks that are about 270 million years old, and then go deeper and back in time as you go through the Grand Canyon, back to rocks that around Phantom Ranch are 1.7, 1.8 billion years of age. And the youngest rocks are volcanics that we'll look at near the very end of the trip here. So these are the large 37, 38-foot long motorized rafts, and you can see the tour guide here in the back with his hand on the motor there like that. They really are big beasts. and you know, they move right down the river, and really, it's the bigger rapids are it's still pretty exciting going through the rapids. Even a raft this size like this. And there were about, I guess there were 20 of us, as I recall. So about 10 participants besides the guides in each of these large rafts like this. And you'll see later, maybe they have a metal deck on them actually. And I have no idea how many tons of people and gear are on this, but it's a whole lot. They are big beasts, and they really carry a lot of stuff. You'll get a sense of that later here, I think. So again, the trips start here below Lake Powell at Lee's Ferry, and then go down through what is one of the narrower parts of the Grand Canyon called the Marble Canyon here. And the first thing you go underneath here, and one of the two places that you can cross the Grand Canyon, is right here at the Navajo Bridge at the start of Marble Canyon. And then the next time you can cross it is down at Phantom Ranch, but only on foot. And you'll see that later as well. So there's the Navajo Bridge. There's actually two bridges. There's one that's no longer open. You can walk across it. And it's this far one. Here is the newer one that the highway actually drives across. So you're entering here into Marble Canyon and into rocks that are a mere 270 million years in age, like that. And this was our first lunch stop here, almost beneath the Navajo bridges. And I'd like to point out how clear the water is here coming out of Lake Powell. It's coming out of the bottom of Lake Powell, on the bottom of the dam. And it's not only clear, it's really, really cold water too. So amazingly cold water coming out of the bottom of that lake there, like that. So further down the canyon, these are the kinds of places, these sandbars, that you camp on or stop and have lunch on, like this. And again, notice how incredibly clear the water is here. Some of these beaches are really wide and you can really spread out. Some are not so wide. You really get sort of packed in, when you set up on these things like this. But so this is an example, and I saw that Mike Adler is on the talk here. There's Mike Adler actually, who was on this trip. And this is one of those spots where there wasn't as much sand and people are pretty well crowded in, like this. Most people set up tents every night and slept in tents. The rafting companies provide all the gear here, other than your clothes and all the food and everything. And everything that you take is packed in these waterproof bags here, like this, which you'll see a lot of as we go through this here, like this. So Sue and I, there's my wife Sue there, like that. We only set up a tent one night when we thought there might be a lot of wind and maybe a shower, and there wasn't. Otherwise, we just slept, in the open air on these cots. And that really, there was something really special about that I'll talk about a little bit later here, like this. But in the spring, and I suspect in the fall as well, the climate is such that rain is really not an issue. In the summertime, it definitely, I think there's a bigger chance of conditions like that. And again, these are those waterproof bags, big bags. And Crate is the company that we went with, and that's short for Colorado River and Trail Expeditions. So they were very good. We really thought they did a great job. They're one of the current 16 companies that are licensed by the Park Service to run commercial trips through the canyon. And I might point out, you have everything really on the rafts is lashed down during the day. So you don't really have access to much. You have these small containers, these 45 caliber ammunition cans that, you have some of your small stuff in. But other than maybe at lunchtime, you just don't have access to stuff that you can't put in a pocket or carry in maybe a small pack that you're wearing, because they just can't leave stuff unlashed and laying around on the surface of these boats, especially as you're going through the rapids. So, and one last thing, this is the poop tent. And one of the things about the trips through the canyon is that nothing other than footprints is left on those sandbars. They really, other than footprints, they really are immaculately clean. And the Park Service, not surprisingly, makes a big, big deal out of that. So, the commercial trips set up these little tents like this. Everything else goes into the river. If you pee, you go and pee into the river. If you brush your teeth, you spit into the river here like this. So you leave nothing on these sandbars other than footprints, that you've made. And the raft guides say, please don't pee in the poop pot there, because they have to carry all that out. They want to carry only poop. They want to carry poop and gallons of pee as well. So everything literally goes into the river, or it goes into something that is carried off and carried away by the rafts themselves. Last picture of the poop tent. All right. So this is a view of a morning getting ready to go again. And, you can see that the guides are, packing everything away. And we as, our rafting, trip members have to pack all of our stuff into these waterproof bags. And then they get stacked and lashed onto the sides of the inside, but on the inside of the front of the rafts here like this. So this picture will hopefully give you a little better sense maybe than many of the scale, the sheer scale of the walls that you're going past here. This is the red wall limestone, and these are sheer, pure, absolutely vertical cliff faces here like this. You can see why it's called the red wall, I think. More on that in just a second. And again, these are almost 40-foot long rafts here like this with 10 and 12 people on each of them. So that gives you a sense of the scale of this, and indeed the width of the river. It's a lot bigger and wider than it looks in some of these photos. So, one of the real highlights, at least for us, I think, was the walks up some of the side canyons. And, we did that multiple times. And again, I think, that's probably one of the advantages of the motorized rafts, in that you just have more time, to get to places and to spend time doing things that are coming up out of the canyon like this. So these were genuine highlights of much of the trip. This was most of our group here like this. And there's our geology guide right there, a fellow named Ivo Lucetta, who is one of the grand old men in terms of studying the Grand Canyon over the last 40 or 50 years. But you can get guidebooks, of course, but having people who have been through the canyon and know where things are at is a real benefit. There are a lot of places where you can see things like this, which are remnants of Anasazi Indian ruins, from probably 1,000, 2,000 or more years ago. And there are places where you can see things like this. You can see petroglyphs, on these, pecked into these boulders like this. So there's all kinds of different emblems or symbols or whatever they are, on these rocks like this. But it really helps to have somebody who's been there. It can take you right to these spots. The canyon is beautiful, and in the springtime, the cactus and other flowers are blossoming. So it's that bit of greenery, even sticky, prickly as it is against the red rocks of the canyon, can make for some really, really beautiful scenery like this here. But again, you can see just how sheer vertical the walls of the red wall limestone are in this upper part of the canyon, through the Marble Canyon section of it. And in the late afternoons when you're done and you get stopped, some of the shadows and things that show up, as the sun disappears pretty early, as it does as narrow as the canyon is, can make for some pretty dramatic scenes as well. So this was a morning a little further down the canyon, and again, the red wall limestone here. And these are actually caves up on, this 700 or 800 foot high cliff face like this. And what I want to call your attention to is this section right here. And this is where part of that cliff face has failed, and you can see how there's greenery and sand and stuff here and over here, and you can see the different color here. And this is because the red on the red wall canyon, a red wall limestone, is staining from the red rocks that have washed down in great big deluges and wash some of the red staining from the iron oxides and the rocks far above. And that's why it's the red wall limestone. Its real color is this gray here like this, but you rarely see it like that. So this is a place called Vasey's Paradise because there's permanent water that comes out of some of these caves, coming from, miles up the sides of the canyons, comes down into the red wall limestone, works its way through it, and then comes out, provides, some, constant water flow and greenery here like that. So that's Vasey's Paradise, about 32 miles down the river from Lee's Ferry. A little further, not much further down the river, again, there's the red wall limestone. But you see this feature here, which is called the red wall cavern, and it doesn't look like much from this far up the river. But when you get to it and get in it, it's a giant feature here like this, and it goes, I don't know, 100, 200 feet back into the limestone at least. So the scale of this, you look at this and you think, oh, that's not very much, but you get there and it's a really impressive feature, and it's the only thing like this along the entirety, the entire trip through the Grand Canyon. There's nothing of this scale like this anywhere else, or anything that really looks like it. It really is a beautiful spot. On the Grand Canyon is beautiful. One of the things, and this is at that spot there, if you go on a trip and you have good guides, they know a lot about the canyon, and they will stop and talk with you, morning, lunchtime, certainly in the evening, about the things that you have seen, that you will see. And it's really good to have people, I think, providing guide service that, they have a lot of experience and know what to stop and see and what to talk about. So in the mornings, and this was morning here like this, you can see it was pretty much dead calm. There wasn't much wind, and some of the reflections you can get are really quite amazing like this. Afternoons is when the wind comes up, and then sometimes it can pretty much just roll and roar up the canyon there like that. And those were the times when I was thinking about the people who were paddling and thinking, I'm glad it's them and I'm glad it's not me. So, really, really neat spot there like that. And then again, you're looking down the canyon to the south towards the south rim like that. So there are, there's a wealth of places to stop and things to see and do. And of course, people who've done it dozens of times probably have seen a lot of these. But so you pick and choose, you work with your guides, and there's, try and talk about, what you're most interested, the kinds of things you're interested in seeing. For us, a lot of cases, it was geology. This was a stop where we were stopping to look at some ancient fossils. And most of you are probably know about nautilus shells. They are something, from the deep Pacific mostly these days. They're these are a type of nautilus-like thing that was linear in shape, and these are the septa, or the pieces of the shell as it grew. This is where the tentacles would hang out of this, and the siphon which would propel it there like that. So there's water poured on this so you can see it a lot better. And there are a lot of things like this you can see if you have people who know where to stop and know what to take you to see. So this is one of our campsites here like this, and I think I think this is morning or getting ready to load things back up here like this, but we did help out with cleaning the dinner dishes and the breakfast dishes like this, so that the guys could get the boats or the rafts ready, and we could get down the river, onto the river a little bit faster like this. So wonderful scenery everywhere along this trip like this. One of the things I'll point out here, here's one of the two raft guides here, and he's driving the motor like this. And if this thing died, or you'll see on some of these rapids where there's a good chance, at least a possible chance, you could destroy the motor by hitting a big rock. There's a whole nother motor here strapped onto each of these rafts like this for that very eventuality like this, and obviously enough gas to drive these things for 11 days and more down the river like this. So again, lots of stops for us to walk up side canyons. And when we stopped, we would, listen to the, descriptions of what we were going to walk to and see what the geology might be like. So, again, for us, there were a lot of these side canyon walks like this, and they really were, a very significant highlight of the trip. A lot of different ones too, to see different things. So this is looking well down Marble Canyon here, and this is some 700 or 800 feet above the above the river level here like this. There's a trail that comes up, and you can see what's probably an old granary, from the Anasazi, from it's been here probably 1,000+ years like this. So there's a lot of there is some modern human history that you can see in the canyon, but there's also more interesting, perhaps, there's a lot of this Indian artifacts and structures and things that can be seen various places along the canyon trip. So again, side canyon walks were a real highlight for us here. There's another picture of us doing that. Here's our geologist, very experienced, talking about some of the geology. Just real quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. He's talking about, the tectonic history from 1.8 billion years ago. But this is really the only geology slide I'll show here, because it gives you a sense of what you go through on a trip through the Grand Canyon. And most of what you go through is in rocks that are only, say, 270 to 500 million years of age. You hear from the Cambrian rocks. Here's the red wall limestone here, the thickest one. And then you go up, you started in rocks that are only about 270 million years of age, the Kaibab Formation. And that's what you spend most of your time on these rafting through, is through these rocks. But as you get down into the core of the canyon, down around Phantom Ranch, there are two other types of rock that you can see. And one is, you can see how these are all tilted, and they were rotated, hundreds of millions of years ago. This is a group of rocks that are also sedimentary rocks that are called the Grand Canyon Supergroup. And this is about the only place in Arizona where they're actually seen, is here in the depths of the Grand Canyon like this. And then, but below those, and again, right around Phantom Ranch and just below Phantom Ranch, you get into the Vishnu schist and into these igneous and metamorphic, metamorphic rocks that are the oldest rocks that you see in the Grand Canyon, and they're 1.7 billion and older years of age. Just for comparison purposes, for all those of us who live here in Jackson Hole, the oldest rocks in the Teton range are about 2.7 billion years old. So by comparison, these are pretty young. So again, side canyon trips were a real treat for all of us, and what we tried to spend a lot and did spend a lot of time doing. Here's the whole group going up one of these side canyons. A lot of really neat scenery, as well as geology, which I won't dive into here, that you can see. Mornings began like this, pretty much always on the sandbar, with both the river guides, the raft guides, and our geologist tour guide giving a talk about what we are seeing right now, what we will see through the rest of the day here like this. So this is how our days typically began. And I think if you did any kind of commercial trip, if it was a good one, the river guides would spend a little while in the morning like this, just alerting you to what you're going to see, because on a couple of different rafts, it's a little hard to talk to everybody like that. This, for your information, I think is the only time that we saw a National Park Service ranger coming down the river. And you can see that he's got all of his gear here. He's all by himself, and trying to keep track of the people that are in the canyon, and that they're taking care of the canyon as well in the way that they should. And my guess is that with the commercial raft trips, that's pretty much not an issue, because they don't, there's no chance that they're going to jeopardize their licenses by doing things, or leaving poop on a beach, for instance, like that. It's just not going to happen. The only other time that we did see Park Service people come was when there was apparently somebody on a raft trip that had managed to break a leg or something, and we saw a Park Service helicopter come in to lift them out of the canyon. So that's not the rangers, they do too, but the river guides all have radio access, satellite access to the Park Service headquarters if it were needed. So we didn't see much of this, but one day you do have to be prepared for varying kinds of weather. And if you look here, you can see there's actually flakes of snow or little bits of sleet falling out of the sky here like this. And this was the only day really when we had gray weather come through and a little bit of precipitation like this. You can see though, it's really not terribly cold even now with that little bit of white stuff falling out of the sky here like this. Spring, and I suspect fall, is really a very, very pleasant time to be down in the canyon like this. But you can get weather like this, and I suspect, you're much more likely to get really severe weather if you're there during the monsoon season, which is in the summertime. The point of this is we're looking, so we've stopped the rafts here like this and stepped out to actually look at a rapids. And the rapids are almost always at the mouths of these large side canyons like this. And the reason those rapids are there is look at all these giant boulders here like this. And they've probably been sitting there for tens of years, maybe centuries even. And the last time they moved, and they would have moved when there was feet of water, from a great big deluge that occurred somewhere up on the, the margins of the canyon. And feet of water would come down and literally move these boulders. And what that results in then is you end up with all this debris in the river here like this, and that's what almost all of the rapids in the Grand Canyon are. And you can look in here and you can see there's all kinds of boulders mixed out in this rapids here like this, and that's why you get all this white water. And that's when you want to make sure if you're on your own that you know what to do, how to get through that. And, we were more than happy to have our raft guides. Here's a couple of them here like this, taking a look at the rapids and making sure that nothing has changed dramatically since the last time they went through here. Because the last thing they want to do is hit some of this stuff going through these rapids like this. So now we're more down into the middle part of the Grand Canyon here like this. And again, it's quite narrow here, and that's because we're in the midst of the Vishnu schist, so these 1.7, 1.8 billion year old igneous and metamorphic rocks, which are very resistant to erosion. And so you end up again with a very narrow canyon here like this. And the Vishnu schist and the associated rocks are much darker rocks like this here. And, there's some pretty good rapids that come down through them here like this. This is a pretty tame one compared to what we'll see a little bit later here. But again, here's the, some of these igneous metamorphic rocks of the Vishnu schist with much younger sedimentary rocks sitting on top of them there like that. You can see here the metal decks that's on top of the raft, and maybe not very well here, but all of our big clothes bags are strapped along the side here, and everything is lashed down, just in case, things get a little too wild in the rapids as you go through them. These are some pictures, close-ups of the Vishnu schist right down at river level. If you think back to, when the river was completely wild before it was dammed, there would be big floods that would come through the Grand Canyon every year. And so all these rocks, these really hard resistant rocks are incredibly polished, really neatly, right here at the river level. And this was just a place where there's a little canyon, side canyon off to the left here, and this was just a good place for them to anchor or tie the rafts to. But you get a lot of these side canyons. There's a surprising amount of water that flows into the Grand Canyon. And so you get walks up these things like this. And whereas the Colorado River water is really cold, these waters and all these side canyons have flown for a long ways through, from way up on the sides of the canyons. And this water is very tepid. It's really almost like bath water like this. And in springtime, there's a lot of flowers that are out. The cactus are blooming and a lot of other flowers. And relatively speaking, there's a lot of greenery out here like this. So a lot of vegetation. places where, these, who knows how old this cactus is here like this, but coming out of a crack in the side of the Vishnu schist like this, it's probably been there a long, long time. So at this point, we've come down from Marble Canyon down and made this big curve here, past where the Little Colorado River comes into the canyon. And so we're coming up on Phantom Ranch. And this section of the canyon right here is, where you're in the oldest rocks here like this. You've gone into the Vishnu schist rocks that are, 1.7, 1.8 billion years of age. And actually, as you'll see, I'll try and point it out later, even though the river goes downhill, obviously the rest of the way, you actually go up into uphill in terms of the age of the rocks again, because the Grand Canyon, the rocks over on this side dip a little bit to the east. On this side, they dip a little bit to the west. And so the deepest part of this very broad gentle anticline is actually right here, right in the center of the Grand Canyon like this. And so that's where you actually see the oldest rocks. Not here and not down here, even further into the canyon like this. So there is the bridge at Phantom Ranch. And so, coming all the way from up there at the Navajo Bridge, if you're not going to swim, this is the only way to walk across the Grand Canyon, in its entirety here like this until you get down to the Lake Mead. So we were having a lunch stop here at Phantom Ranch, and if you wanted to, you could go in and take a look and maybe even buy an ice cream cone or something at some obscene price. I should point out, and I probably should have earlier, there you see these bags hanging off the rafts here like this. The river water is cold, and so in these bags are soda cans, beer cans, anything else that you want to keep cold other than what's in the coolers on the rafts themselves are just cooled by hanging in these bags off the side of the rafts here like this. And so here you can see the dry bags here stacked along each side of the front of the rafts here like this. And again, everything like this is all strapped down. There is a metal deck on these things, but there's a nice, great big heavy pads here like this that we sit on as we ride down the river on these rafts. Food is great on these commercial trips. It really was spectacular all the way through. Fresh food all the way through. Lunchtime was all cold stuff. So cold cuts, meats, cheeses, salads, greens, and really, really good. And you can see this gentleman right here is actually, probably got one of the cold cans of soda pop that he's drinking there along with his lunch like that. Evenings are very special, we always thought. You have enough chairs for everybody as well as tables. And, here's our boxes of wine, box wine, which we actually ran out of about the last day or so. The guy who made the estimate on how much people were going to drink was underestimated by just a little bit there like that. But social sessions in the evening are really also a highlight for the trip here like this. A really good chance to get together with everybody. And you can see, people are wearing, some, warm clothes here in the evening. It does cool off at night in the spring and in the fall in the Grand Canyon there like that. In the summertime, people are probably praying for the night to come and it cools off a little bit. Dinner time is always really good too. You can see our guides here. Always hot food at dinner time like this. And I think this was probably a burritos night. There's tortillas and all kinds of makings here, and he's probably cooking the meat for to make our burritos like this. And you can see there's a beer can right there, Pabst Blue Ribbon. So some people did bring some beer along, and they were cold because they were hung in the river on those bags. So drifting down the river, and we're getting a little bit of a lecture here about the geology that we can see. And so up here, you can see there's the 270 million year old rocks up there. There's the red wall limestone, about 350 to 370 million years old. These are those dipping Grand Canyon supergroup rocks, which are beneath these horizontal layers, roughly horizontal layers of the younger rocks. So these are rocks that are 700 to 1.2 billion years in age here like this. So they're all sedimentary rocks as well. so there's quite a story there to talk about, to the extent that you have interest. And again, you can see these dipping rocks here in the background, and the horizontally, essentially, layered rocks above the dipping rocks. So, so the unconformity is somewhere around there. So the bottom rocks there are about 500 million years old, and these are 700 to 1.2 billion years of age, like that, and that we're walking in here and talking about the geology. Again, the side canyons are dramatic. They're really spectacular to walk in, experience. This is the kind of thing you could not do, if there were big storms on the sidewalls, on the walls of the canyon. All this rock here has been deposited by water flowing down through these side canyons like this. And you can look and find photos of, even now, the Colorado River, after a big rainstorm, can be turbid, can be muddy. And these side canyons can be, a place you couldn't be, because there's feet of water moving boulders down them like this. But, spring and fall, I think, it's pretty easy to walk up these side canyons and see a lot of really, really neat stuff. Again, there's this amazing amount of water that flows into the Grand Canyon from these side canyons like this. And you get these little sort of paradise-like spots, all these dry red rocks, and you get, sort of fairy ferns and rainbows and things like this, that occur there at the base of these waterfalls. This is coming further down the canyon. We've actually left the oldest rocks behind. And so now we're back up into rocks that are only, say, 500 million years old here like this, even though we're a good ways further down the canyon. So, and again, these side canyons provide a lot of really beautiful little spots here like this, sort of fairy-like spots, where the water is pouring over the side of the canyon. And, you have ferns that are growing there year-round like that. So this was maybe, the most dramatic of the side canyon walks that we did, and that was at Havasu Canyon, Havasu Creek, which is at River Mile 157, so a long ways down the canyon like this. I'll show you later on a map where that is. Here are our two big, our big rafts tied up here, and we're walking in. So this is a little deceptive. This is the width of the river right here. You can see how wide it is, so it doesn't look as wide. So the photo is a little deceptive, but this is where Havasu Creek flows into the Colorado River, and this is real color like this. Havasu Creek, the reason it's so blue like this is it's super saturated in dissolved calcium carbonates. And again, I've seen pictures, and you can find pictures where this is brown from water flowing, down the canyon, muddy water like this. And I think at certain times of the year, it's also not quite as vividly blue as it was when we came down here in the springtime like this. But this is real color. And we walked, I don't know, a mile or two up Havasu Creek like that, and had lunch up there. You can see people crossing the creek back here like this. And again, the water in this creek like this it's almost like bath water. It's so tepid, especially as compared to the Colorado River water itself. And, and again, it really is a pretty magical place, Havasu Canyon. And you're in the Havasupai Indian Reservation. We didn't go far enough up where, we saw any of that, but you can also hike down to Havasu Falls, and you can camp and actually, you can camp down in the Havasupai Reservation here on Havasu Creek, further up the canyon here like this. But, a really magical side canyon walk here, and one that probably is not to be missed if you make a trip through the Grand Canyon. And again, springtime, there's the river there like that. There's somebody for scale. But the Ocotillo in the springtime was really in bloom. And we're a little bit early at this particular spot, but a lot of the cactus was in bloom as well. And you can see it not so well, but there's some cactus starting to be in blossom here like this, which makes for some, really beautiful contrast to, the sheer desolation, if you will, of the bare rocks here like this in the canyon. Again, side canyon walks were really magical. If you managed to get someplace before somebody went and splashed through it, you could get some really, beautiful reflections of the canyons that you're walking through here like this. There is wildlife in the canyon. We saw desert bighorns, which these are. multiple times. This just happened to be the closest place where, with the lens that I was using, I was able to get a pretty decent shot. And because it was springtime as well, the ewes here have their lambs of the season. So, and they are incredibly cute, to say the least, here like this. So, we saw them 3 or 4 times at least, but this was the only time when we were really very close. So we're getting pretty far down the canyon now and a lot closer to the end. And, what is this? Well, this is columnar basalt. So what you'll see, this is the result of lava flows that flowed into the canyon here, geologically speaking, relatively recent, like in the last 75 to 100,000 years like this. And basalt, when it cools, can form these columns like this. But here's a step back, and here you can see, the generally oranges and yellows and red rocks of the sedimentary rocks. These black rocks like this are basalt flows that came in from up off, above the canyon wall like this and flowed down into the Colorado River. So before I get to that, I just want to mention that these lava flows, it's been documented at times formed natural dams in the Grand Canyon. And there's evidence that some of these dams were probably as much as maybe 1,000 feet high. So there would have been a natural lake upstream from where these lava flows flowed into the canyon, that was there probably thousands of years before the river cut back through them like this here. So the most recent, the youngest of these is right around 75,000 years of age. So this is, we're getting near the end here, and Lava Falls Rapids is a falls that is a result of some of this lava, these lava flows that flowed into the Grand Canyon here. And so this is actually the biggest rapids, and certainly the most dramatic rapids in the Grand Canyon here like this. And, we got out and our rafts are parked here to the left upstream of the rapids like this. And everybody does it. You can see the walk here like this, comes and takes a look at what you're going to ride through here at Lava Falls Rapids like this. And it really is pretty dramatic. So everybody is contemplating, what we're about to ride through. And our river guides are looking just to make sure that the boulders and things haven't moved around so that they can make sure that they know exactly where to go through this here like this. Because apparently, there are certain ways you want to go through it, and there's certain ways that you certainly don't want to go through it. So Lava Falls Rapids has a nearly 40-foot drop in elevation through its extent here like this. It really is a very significant drop in elevation, and it is the biggest rapids in the Grand Canyon. You see there's a smaller one on down below there like that. So I went through on the first raft, asked to go through, and actually had changed the lens, which we'll talk about in a minute here, so that I could try and photograph the next raft coming through. And there is the second raft coming through right at the top of the rapids there like that. So from here down to, about here is about 40-foot change in elevation almost. And it's, I'll just go through these pretty quickly. It's quite a ride here like this. And you can see the scale of some of the drops here like this as you go through the rapids like this. And what's pretty amazing is how flexible these almost 40-foot long rubber rafts actually are, even with all the steel that's in them here like this. And everybody gets wet. There's no avoiding that coming through these things like this. And you can see the front end lifted up here as it comes over this wave like this. It's quite a ride, to say the least, here like this. You can see there's sort of holes out here that, in between the waves that the rafts go through. It's amazing how far down into some of these holes the rafts actually sink between the waves like this. So pretty neat. I think you can see a lot of smiling faces in here like this. It's quite a carnival ride that you take here going through through Lava Falls like this. So here we are at the bottom then, gathering ourselves back together again and allowing me to get back on the raft like this, so that we can, continue down to basically to our exit point. And I'll point out here's some of that dark lava flow that you can see here coming into the Grand Canyon. And here's a better shot of it. You can see all this dark rock here that has literally just flowed over the canyon walls and down into the Grand Canyon. There's a really good shot of it. You can see. Imagine this when it was molten. And if you were down here 75,000 years ago, seeing, molten lava coming down into the canyon here at you, it would have been quite a sight. So here we are at our takeout point, which is Whitmore Wash, almost 190 miles down the river. Phantom Ranch is just off to the right here, off of this map. Lava Falls Rapids is just not too many miles above Whitmore Wash right here, which is where we took out. And we went out in helicopter to the Bar 10 Ranch here like this, and then flew in fixed wing craft that you'll see here in a moment back to back to town. So here was our ride to get out of the canyon. What you can see here in the background, though, on this wall is again a whole bunch of this columnar basalt. So you get a sense of how much lava there was at points way down the canyon like this, actually flowing into the Grand Canyon. So this was our exit. So you can see I'm photographing through the plexiglass of the helicopter, and you can see, the lava flows coming down into the canyon here like this, from 75, 80 to 100,000 years ago. And imagine this forming a dam across the entirety of the width of the Grand Canyon here. So this is where we flew to, which is Bar 10 Ranch, the Whitmore International Airport, which is, as you can see here, an elevation of 4,100 feet. The river level where we left was right about 12 to 1,400 feet. So this is a good half mile higher than the river level where we lifted off from with the helicopters. Of course, the North Rim itself is right around 8,000 feet. So, even this Bar 10 Ranch is way down in the canyon here like this, where this little landing strip is. And really the last photo here, here's the canyon like this. And I'm in that, here's the wing of the aircraft. This is Vulcan's throne here like this. And all this dark material that you see is lava flows or cinder cones. This is a great big cinder cone. You can see some other lava flows way in the background here like this. It's real dark material, which is also basaltic lavas. So there was a lot of that here that occurred, at this part of the Grand Canyon. And it really did cause some dramatic things to occur. Some of the things that I think John Wesley Powell was worried about, were there waterfalls that he and his first crew that came through here were going to have to deal with. And fortunately, of course, they did not. So photography then on the Grand Canyon rafting trip is how I'll finish this up. So challenges. Certainly, camera contamination is a big concern. There's water, there's dust, there's sand, there's sunscreen on your hands and face and everything else everywhere. Extreme light contrast. That one shot I took and showed you from inside of the Redwall Canyon, you could see, if you notice, that there were some blown out sections looking out of that canyon, out of that cave like that. And I wasn't able to deal with that for a reason I'll get to in just a second, which is mostly gear limits. So they're specified by the trip company, but you saw that we exited the canyon via helicopter. There might not be a limit if you went all the way through down to Lake Mead or somewhere where you could just get out, in a truck or something like that. But they had some, they really tried to limit the amount of gear that you had and certainly the weight. And when we did fly out in the helicopter, I very vividly remember the helicopter pilot making a big deal about how much you weighed, how much your bag weighed, how much all your gear weighed before you got onto his helicopter like that. If you've ever flown in helicopters, you know that is a really big deal. And the other thing is, you will not almost for sure be changing gear during the day. Things are put away in watertight bags, and even those small watertight boxes and things are all lashed down, so they're just not readily available to you during the day. You've got to have things in a day pack that you can be wearing, or in a pocket or something, that you can grab things in or out of there like that. What I took was a standard 35 millimeters SLR with two lenses, a 10 to 24 zoom and a 28 to 300 zoom. And almost the entire time through the canyon, I was using this 10 to 24 zoom. And that was a really, really effective choice, given the scope and scale of things there in the Grand Canyon. I really only use this zoom like this for shooting those shots of coming through lava falls rapids like that. Otherwise, this was a much more effective choice for camera gear throughout the entirety of the trip, really. You certainly want to have cleaning supplies to hand. You want to have enough batteries. How did I do that? Because they're not going to allow you to lay out great big arrays of solar cells on the rafts. There can't be loose stuff, and people have to be able to move around with it. It just would not work like that. So you want to have enough batteries in your pocket in your gear to take care of that. And because of the advice, the very strong advice from the companies, I did not have a tripod, and I wish that I had one. And more on that now, because I know Mike Adler is on, or he was on earlier. The common internet advice is to bring, why is it doing this? A waterproof camera. That's pretty, that would solve a lot of issues there like that. I really had no problems though with the standard SLR. I literally just took a great big heavy plastic, clear plastic bag, slipped my camera into it when we passed through rapids like that, and took it back out. I had the strap around my neck, obviously, and had no issues with that throughout the entire trip like that. But Mike is going to get a kick out of this here now. I really, really, really wish that I'd had a tripod, and the reason being that very first night, so Sue and I were sleeping on those cots there in a sleeping bag. Almost everybody else was either asleep or inside of a tent. I woke up about 3 a.m. and there was this in the sky above us, the most incredible Milky Way scenes I have ever seen. I've seen some pretty good ones like up in Yellowstone and way up at the north end of Grand Teton. But I have never just looked up and seen a Milky Way like we were seeing there every night. It would, obviously the Earth is rotating, and the Milky Way came into view around 2:30, 3 a.m. in the morning there in the middle of April. And it was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. I got up the next morning, was just raving and said, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" And nobody else had seen it there like that. But Mike, fortunately, had brought a tripod, despite the advice not to do that. And so he set up, and these are Mike Adler's photos here like this. I couldn't do it, unfortunately, but it was one of the more spectacular things. It's probably the biggest bonus, if you will, that we had on this whole trip here like this. So spectacular way to end this in my estimation, and we got to see this every night. So that's all, folks. So any questions or comments or kibitzes or rebuttals? And there's the extent of the trip. Again, from Lee's Ferry to Whitmore Wash here like that.
Oh, you'll have to unmute if you want to.
I won't stop share. You can do the unmute, I think.
Yeah, I think, give me just a second. Well, I can ask everybody to unmute. If you want to say something, be sure you unmute yourself.
I'm jealous.
John, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
That was brilliant, by the way. Thanks for that presentation. How many hours a day were you on the river?
Actually floating, well, it depended, because we did do a lot of stops and we did a lot of multi-hour walks, upside canyons. There were one or two places where we actually did a loop around, so much of a day. Some days, that first day, pretty much, from you're probably on the water by 8-ish. I'd say after breakfast, after a really lovely breakfast, that the guides prepare for you, pack everything up. You're probably done with or without stops by 4. There's the Park Service allows only a limited number of trips in the canyon at any given time, both commercial and private. And the private licenses are very much limited. It's a lottery type of thing. And so, there are only a limited number of these beautiful beaches that you can camp on. And so, they make sure that it's not overloaded and that, people are spaced out enough that you can get a really good campsite by the end of the day there, say 4 o'clock-ish. And that's probably 4 or 5, long days in April, but, the guides want time to set up the tables and their cooking gear and give you time to set up, your cots and sleeping bags and all that kind of stuff like that. And again, the social hours were really, they were a highlight every day as well, getting together and just talking about what we'd seen, what we'd done, and just, having a glass of wine or a beer and really enjoying, the fruits of our day, if you will.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. Do you see many people on the river, and did you ever have to share a campsite with another group?
We did not have to share ever.
Okay.
We might have, the guides knew roughly what the options were by the end of the day. They've done this many times before. There might have been one spot where we had to go past their preferred beach and campsite, but we never had to share a campsite. Really, people are so spread out, you don't see many people on the river like that. It's really well done. The Park Service has really thought this through. So I said there's 16 commercial guiding companies, and I don't know, how many private licenses the Park Service gives out, but it's all very carefully managed, and it is limited such that the experience is a pretty wild one all the way through the canyon.
What company did you go with?
We went with Crate, which is Colorado River and Trail Expeditions. They're one of, I looked, and there are currently 16 licensed rafting companies. I think there are probably 3 or 4 biggest ones, and Crate is one of those. And they've been doing it, I think I read, since 1971. So they've got, 55 years of experience doing this, and the guides really are excellent. I'm sure they are on the other companies as well, but they are knowledgeable. They're they're really pleasant people. The food is great. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are fantastic throughout. And they provide a fantastic service.
So John, were the motors on all day, or was there any just actual floating
A little bit of actual floating. Mostly, we were motoring from one place we want to stop at to the next. There was probably, except for maybe the very first day and maybe the last day, which was only a partial day, really. We did a stop or two every day. So we would motor in between, and motors are quiet. They're not at all obtrusive. And again, when the winds would come up in the afternoon, which they did, they blow up the canyon, and it was really nice to have that motor to be pushing us along and not be trying to worry about, can you go against the wind here like this with either paddles or with oars like that?
Did anyone go swimming?
The answer really is no. I think we all probably bathed in the river, but it was like taking a cold shower. I mean, that water is cold coming out from underneath the bottom of Lake Powell here. I don't know what the temperature was, but 50s maybe coming out of the bottom of Lake Powell. So I don't think there was any real swimming that went on. When people really got wet was going through some of those big rapids like that. And if you really wanted to sort of bathe, and some people did on some of these side canyons, literally underneath some of the little waterfalls, the water in those side canyons is tepid. At that time, even at that time of year, in the middle of April, I can't imagine. It might be hot in summertime. So, I didn't include any pictures of naked people underneath waterfalls, but there was a lot of that going on too at various places. But the water is cold. I very much remember, taking a bath down, once or twice along the way like that, washing my hair and everything. And you do all that in the river. Everything goes into the river, literally like that. They don't want to see anything left on the shore anywhere. It's cold.
Hmm.
So were y'all, the time of the year you went, was it considered a high flow, medium, low?
Um, there was, it was sort of I think a standard flow coming out of Lake Powell. It's all controlled by the Colorado River Pack, which is the, what is it, 8 states, I think, that make up the Colorado River Basin Concord, which is in great disarray right now as they fight about, there's only about 2/3 as much water as has been being used. It was back in the 1920s when they distributed the amounts of water to the upper states like Wyoming, Colorado, and the lower states like California gets most of it actually. And there's just no longer enough water to do that anymore. So, some years back, they did do some flushing flows from Lake Powell through the Grand Canyon to try and replicate, some of the floods that used to occur before the Glen Canyon Dam was created here. Because they were losing some of the sandbars and things like that, without these big water flows coming through the canyon. I don't think they can do that now just because of I doubt that they can do it because of how much water, how little water there is, how much there is less than what was agreed to back in the 20s when the Colorado River Basin Pact was created. So, and again, before everybody came on, I think you and I and Randy were talking, there's been discussion, predictions actually, that Lake Powell may get so low later this summer that they will not actually anymore be able to generate electricity from the Lake Powell Dam, which
Wow.
would be a big, big, big deal.
Well, and yeah, actually, when the Colorado River Compact was signed, everybody knew that it was based on flows that historically were much higher than average. So that's part of the reason they're in trouble now. That
In the 20s, so they were basing it on data from like early 20th century, from like 1900 to I think it was 1926 roughly is when that Colorado River Pact was agreed to. And certainly in retrospect, we know now that that was one of the wetter, higher flow periods, going back probably hundreds, if not thousands of years.
yeah,
John,
as I
can
said,
you
they
hear
actually
me?
knew that when they made the agreement that it was fake.
They probably knew it was optimistic. They didn't know that we would have, situations like today, I think.
John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So yeah, my husband Mike and I did this trip with Arizona Rafting Adventure Company. They're called ASRA about 10 years ago. And we also had a fantastic experience. We were on the river for about 9 days. I think we went a little further than you did. I was just curious, did you see any snakes or scorpions and do any photography of that kind of wildlife?
The only no is short answer. The little bit longer, sort of humorous answer is that one of the guides brought a little fake coral snake along
Oh no.
and set it right where everybody was walking and pointed it out, in great fear to the other guides who panicked, not realizing there is no such thing as a coral snake in the American Southwest. It caused a great stir for, until he got his ha-has in and everybody realized it was a joke. But I don't recall seeing any snakes, any scorpions. About the only wildlife we saw were actually the desert bighorn sheep.
I see. The other thing I was going to say is Mike he took his good camera. I just took my iPhone, but ended up taking a little solar panel, little tiny thing that I could charge the battery on my phone with, and that was very popular.
I am sure it was.
Very small. It was like the size of a sheet of paper, and it worked really well. You just lay it out in the sun, and it charged up beautifully. So Just FYI on that.
Yep.
Yeah, also I will say that we were there in the summer and it was very hot. We can
Yes,
confirm that.
in June, yeah.
Yeah, no, everybody said that probably the two optimal times are, spring and fall. And
Yeah,
I would vote for spring because of the flowers and things that are out like that. And there's probably more water flowing into the canyon in spring than there is in the fall, I suspect as well. Maybe not. I mean, you do get the monsoon in the summer, and you can see a lot of photos of pictures people have taken when some of these monsoonal rains have occurred. You can see, just incredibly turbid brown water coming out of a lot of these side canyons, and even the Colorado itself, which for us was essentially perfectly clear the whole way, can be very muddy.
right. Well, it was so hot that the 50-degree Colorado River felt refreshing to swim in.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a little too cool for
Yeah.
that kind of enjoyment.
Enjoyed your pictures and it was a great presentation. Thank you.
Great. It's a fantastic trip, and I would recommend it to anybody who
Yeah, me too.
might be interested.
It was a once in a lifetime experience.
Probably for us too.
John, was there a long waiting list for you to get it on it?
No, if you, I think the short answer is if you book with a commercial trip, commercial company, they have fair number of trips and they have a fair number of spaces. But I think even so, you would probably, if you want to float this in 27, you would probably want to be looking at booking it now.
Yeah,
I
what I
suspect,
suspected.
except for a cancellation, you probably would have difficulty booking a trip for 26 already.
Yeah.
And I know that for the private licenses, permits, people put in for those and can wait years to, be successful and get the permit that they're looking for.
Yeah, one of my friends waited 15 years to get a permit. She went in the lottery every single year. 5 people went in the lottery every year for 15 years before they got a permit. They're going
Wow.
this year. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's probably gotten worse because, the demand to do something like that, just increases, and they're not going to give out more permits than the stated amount. And it really does it is one of the things that makes for a much more special, wonderful trip because it's
Yeah.
not crowded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it?
That was great, John. Thanks.
Thank
Stop
you.
the share here
Yeah.
like this. So
Yeah.
Mike Adler, thank you for sharing and allowing me to show those Milky Way shots. And I wish I had been able to take some of my own.
Well, so yeah, quick question for Michael then, Adler. What lens did he use on those?
Yeah, hi there. I am still here. Yeah, it was a Canon SLR full frame. It was a 24 to 100 L type lens. I shot everything at 24
Yep.
and about an exposure of about 30 seconds. Anything longer than that, you start blurring the stars. Since I had a tripod, but I didn't have, it wasn't motorized. Plus, there was another factor was I didn't want to blur the canyon either. So, and I did a trick. Some of those pictures that John showed show some light on the canyon walls. And that's a little bit of a Photoshop trick because I left the camera on the tripod until dawn, and then I took another picture of the same scene. So I had the wall of the canyon in light, and needless to say, I dimmed it, I overlaid it, and I dimmed it down so that it looked sort of night-like, even though it wasn't night when I took the picture. Anyway, uh,
Mike, can I ask a quick question? What was the reason they wouldn't let you take a tripod? And what did you take in
actually,
the end?
I actually asked for permission.
Okay.
I actually asked for permission, and two of us had tripods. I think I was the only one who was actually using it because you'll have to talk to my wife about this. But as John was saying, the Milky Way was came up around 3:30 in the morning, not an exactly convenient time. And so I set my alarm on my watch, and I would crawl out of the tent at 3:30 in the morning every day, every night almost, particularly the first maybe 6 or 7 days because the canyon is north-south at that point. And so the Milky Way was nicely framed in the canyon walls. When we started going east and west, it wasn't quite as nice. So most of the pictures that John showed, I think were on that first stretch where the canyon is north-south.
But it's, Sue and I, other than one night when it was sort of windy, we thought there might be a few showers. Even set a tent up. And I seemed every night to wake up and just open my eyes, and there is this stunning Milky Way directly overhead. No moon. Obviously, Flagstaff is the nearest set of lights, and it's 100 miles away. There's no light pollution whatsoever from down in that canyon like that. I've never seen the Milky Way like this, even in the Southern Hemisphere, which is a different experience. Yellowstone's probably the next best I've seen the Milky Way.
It's probably one of the darkest spots in the United States, the bottom of the Grand Canyon like that. So you really get a lot of and the view with just your naked eye was spectacular. But a 30-second exposure, though, you could bring out more detail.
So you want to pick a time when there's a new moon, if you possibly can, on a trip.
Obviously, yeah. We hit it. We hit it perfully. Yeah.
And you'd want to, different times of the year, the Milky Way comes up, or you won't see much of it at all. So you'd really, want to use photo pills or something to, really figure out exactly when an optimal time would be. Again, I think spring or fall would probably be optimal from a climate perspective. But if you were going to shoot the night sky like this, then you'd want to make sure you knew whether the spring or the fall, which weeks are going to give you the optimal view of the Milky Way like this, because it was like something I've never seen anything better than that Milky Way. Every night, every morning.
Every morning, yeah. I'd crawl out of the bed, went back in, slept for another hour or so, and then got up again to take another picture with the camera on the wall of the canyon. Yeah.
Really nice work, Mike. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fun.
And again, thanks, Mike, for allowing me to share those.
No problem. I was more than happy to do that.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? All quiet. Well, we hope everybody stays safe. No meteors hit Cleveland. And yeah, well, we'll let you guys go. Thanks, everybody. And then stay tuned. Next week, we're going to do, I think, infrared photography. So
next month.
Yeah. Cool. I'll let you guys go.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.